Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shay Castillo, and I work at Wickenholz and Partners, and I'm a landscape architect. And with me today, as part of Group One, I have Alejandra Mesa, who works with Payette, Mariah Jenkins McNeil from TG Gallagher, and Tony Adoricio from Trinity Building and Construction. So our group is made up of a mix of different disciplines within the AEC world. So this kind of led us to how we picked our project topic. We found the common ground between us all, and that happened to be PROCORE. So we wanted to discover how different user groups use it and ultimately unravel the good, the bad, and the ugly on PROCORE. So before we begin, it might be a little difficult now, but we wanted to see if there's a show of hands of who has used PROCORE before. But everyone has their cameras off, but we're kind of assuming that most people have come across PROCORE and used it already in their office. I'll go to the next slide.
So a little background. So as we may know, from the majority of its history, construction has been a pretty inefficient industry. And, some of the most famous projects, of ancient times took hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years to build. And that's, due to the lack of resources that they had, obviously, back then. And over time, the industry's completely evolved. And as you saw in the last presentation, technology has really improved over the last 20 years. And one of those things that has happened is the creation of cloud-based softwares. And one of those cloud-based softwares that I think is very beneficial to the construction industry is PROCORE. So it was created in 2002 by Craig Quartermanchi, and it was created just as a way for him to track the progress of his house that he was building in California. The progress had completely slowed down, and he wasn't on site every day, so he needed to know the comings and goings of people, the drawings that were being put up, the schedule, the pictures. A lot of the main core tools that we use today were originally on the software, and he was like pretty much ahead of his time, or really ahead of his time, because in 2002 the iPhone was still 5 years out. Wi-Fi wasn't a readily available thing as it is today. So there was a lot of, paper plans, notes, faxes that the industry ran on. And he never even, Craig Quartermanchi, he never saw the internet making it to the job site, but he just wanted to create a place where he could get all the project members in one spot and kind of wash away the inefficiencies that the industry has. And I mean, I think he's succeeded, because today PROCORE has, if you could go to the next slide. Today, PROCORE has 13 separate products. It's targeted at general contractors, subcontractors, accountants, office managers, estimators, owners. It can specialize in things like finance and invoice management, quality control, safety management, estimating, and that's just to name a few. And then if PROCORE doesn't provide it itself, it has more. It has like an app store that it uses of over 250 third-party integrated apps that you can use to make PROCORE more efficient. So you can add Autodesk, BIM, OpenSpace, and things like that. The goals for this project, if you go to the next slide, we wanted to understand how PROCORE is used by each of the disciplines, because we figured that we all use it. So, and we use it in different volumes. So how do those differ? We wanted to determine what aspects of PROCORE are beneficial to the industry as a whole. We wanted to determine the areas that PROCORE, the software itself, could improve, and how could it, get better with things like construction processing, document control, information sharing. And then we wanted to uncover the challenges that people face when using it. And then one more, and then it's important because, like I said, construction still today can be an inefficient industry. So now that we know that we all use this product, what's the best way to use it, and what are some of the deficiencies that are caused with it?
So for this, our research methodology was to create a survey of AEC professionals. And how we did that was we initially outlined our survey questions, went to a sample group for responses, came back, analyzed some of those results, edited our questions to make them more clear, to be able to actually get the responses that we were looking for. And then we went into a second round of survey interviews and analyzed the quality of our responses afterward to come create to determine the same project goals. So our survey goals were to gain an understanding of the different AEC disciplines and their usage of PROCORE, what they found beneficial about PROCORE, to determine what areas that our specific respondents thought PROCORE could improve on, and uncover the challenges that they face every day. So here's a sample of our questions. So our questions uh, ranged from who they were, their experience in the AEC industry, what they used Procore for, how it made things for them easier or harder, their thoughts on the usefulness of the mobile app, the desktop, and the desktop app platform, and find out what how Procore impacted the communication on their projects. One of the ones that we found kind of interesting when going through this, what is the question on in what 2 to 3 ways is a mobile app useful? There were some people who responded that they had never even used the app or didn't even know it existed. So we actually received responses saying that, which was pretty cool. And another one we asked was, how did Procore make the project more difficult? Which it seemed to be a consensus that maybe it didn't. There were some other things that we uncovered with the responses to that one, which we'll go further into in the presentation. And then another interesting one was, how do you compare jobs on Procore to jobs without Procore in terms of the communication? And it seemed to be a lot of um, depending on where people fell in with their experience, it was either it made things better or they had never even known a world without Procore.
Alrighty, so now we can move on into our survey findings. And so to start off, we first wanted to get an understanding of the level of experience within the AEC industry of the survey respondents and who we surveyed. So as you can see from the visual on the pie chart, from our survey results, we had a mix of experience ranging from 1 to 5 years all the way up to 15 plus years of experience, so quite
And
seasoned professionals.
w-
The total number, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was around 15 to 20 folks. Correct me if I'm wrong,
okay,
for my team, but I
okay,
think
that
it
sounds good.
ranged around there.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we had quite a diverse group of individuals ranging from the wide range of different levels of experience. One from being, fresh and new professionals and quite seasoned professionals. And this kind of just goes to show that Procore really is used across the board between all different levels of experience. So we can go to the next slide. So what people liked. So in general, we did receive more positive feedback rather than negative survey feedback. And based on those results, the tools on Procore that individuals seemed to like the most based on the survey results was number one being drawings. So that's basically having the ability to access linked drawings for all the different disciplines on the project. That's proved to be the most popular tool. So for example, we did have one mechanical contractor that we surveyed. They found that that was the most useful tool, being able to access the drawings on Procore while they're out on the field. And for example, another landscape architect that we surveyed, they noted that one of the ways Procore seems to make their job easier is by just having one set location where like it's a main hub that keeps all of the drawings for the project organized for all the different disciplines. The second option, or the second topic that was the most liked, was the tool of RFIs and submittals. So basically having one location for RFIs and submittals to be accessed, and you can also respond to them. So that really helps the construction administration process paperwork go smoother. And then lastly is specifications, forms, and models. So that was a handy tool that some may not be aware is available on PROCORE, which is basically you can open up the 3D model of a project and be able to see it on your desktop at work, or if you are out on the site, you can see the 3D model on the phone app while you're out on site. So that's quite helpful to reference rather than just looking at a 2D drawing in front of you. So we'll go to the next slide. So here is a visual bar graph of the survey results that we received. We organized it to get a better understanding of how it works, or how our survey results looked across the board. So as I mentioned, the most liked tool was RFIs and submittals. And then on the lower end, the results for other things that were liked, but just not as much, were things like inspections, daily logs, reports, among other things. So we can move on to the next one. So now we get to move on to what people didn't like. So some of the negative survey results that we collected were, one, the constant reminders and notifications. So PROCORE has a system that sends out continuous notifications and reminders via email when you have a pending RFI or a submittal. So some of the respondents mentioned that this seemed to be a nuisance when they were surveyed, and while others did also say that they found this to be helpful. But they do tend to send quite often constant reminders when something's pending on PROCORE. And then the two other things that people didn't like kind of work hand in hand. So that is the bureaucracy and chain effect, as well as construction manager and admin access control. So this is where it seems that there seems to be a chain effect that's required within the PROCORE program to be able to update an RFI submittal or any other mistake. You need to have some form of construction manager or a managing party who set up the PROCORE project page to be able to access, edit, change, anything simple like that, or even add information. You need to have someone who has basically admin access. So this kind of in turn results in a very step-by-step process in a very bureaucratic process just to make any slight edits. And two, we did receive two specific survey responses saying that this particular negative thing about PROCORE was one thing that made their day-to-day job difficult. So that was quite interesting. So next, we have another bar graph visual of the survey results of what people didn't like. So as I mentioned previously, the main one being that chain effect and the bureaucratic steps that are needed to make any slight changes. And then closely behind was the constant reminders. And then on the lower end were things like the lack of PROCORE tool being able to be customized or customizable tools, the user experience and the process of using PROCORE, and then the lack of meaningful communication that happens within PROCORE.
Now I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about people we surveyed, but also how their responses varied a bit. So like we talked about a little bit earlier, Shay's a landscape architect, I'm an architect, Mariah works for a specialty contractor, and Tony works for a CM. So we had a great range of in our team already perspectives on how PROCORE was used. So we wanted to jump in a little bit as to how that varied between different groups that we spoke to. So architects, the way we saw this is architects are using PROCORE, and my little slogan there was "It's a contractor's world." Really, one thing that's kind of interesting is that when you think about at least my job as an architect, and I think a lot of people, is we have so many phases of construction that CA is only one of them. So because of that, we see PROCORE a little differently than contractors do. Because we already have our own system that we're using day in, day out about sending information and not. So PROCORE is one of the things that we then have to integrate into it. So I think that affects a lot of things, and the way we perceive it is a little different there. One of the things that you saw that drawings, RFIs, and submittals, that was the big thing that overlaps between the disciplines of having issues. But really, architects, their main feedback was about the way the software and the contractor set it up, a lot less about, oh, I want a new feature. When you look into what the contractors really ask for, they're looking at invoicing, communication, and they really want specific features. They're talking about some more niche items, whereas architects were really more complaining about the access notifications. They're like, oh, drawings, RFIs, it's all in the same place. Whereas when you look at a bit more specifically what the contractors we're talking about, they talk about inspections and invoices, and it gets a little bit more nuanced into how the day-to-day of PROCORE versus the communication, which I think you see across the board as a bit of that conversation there. And I think when you talk about specialty contractors, generally the same feedback we get from contractors, except that they also have a bit of some same complaints about some of the procedures that are set up by the controller of PROCORE, which really is the hostess with the mostest contractors are the ones who are setting it up for everyone on the team and are the ones who are enabling certain permissions and not allowing them to do things because of the way the project needs to flow. But that's where some of that.
All right. So as we found through our surveys, maybe some individuals aren't getting the most out of PROCORE. So we have a couple of different recommendations for them. PROCORE offers some certifications for its users, which are free. They're for architects, engineers, owners, general and specialty contractors, because oftentimes you get used to asking colleagues how to do things on PROCORE, but going through these courses, they're in depth and teach you how to use PROCORE, whether it's to do submittals and that whole construction management process from that end, and as well as managing RFIs. They should also use the help tool. The help tool has these great, wonderful step-by-step how-to videos on how to do things like upload drawings or even markup and review submittals. And also PROCORE has a community of other users from all over the world, where they go and share tips, tricks, and even add suggestions on how PROCORE can add or even make things better for individual users. And on the organization's end, they probably aren't getting the best out of their investment in PROCORE. And I'm sure PROCORE costs a lot of money with its different tools. They usually rely on the initial training sessions. So we suggest maybe having more training sessions, maybe biannually or even quarterly, to just kind of keep people up to date on the different PROCORE processes that they use within their organization. They should also encourage those certificates. It's free. You're already paying for PROCORE. Might as well earn a certificate that you get at the end of the course. It doesn't even expire. And they can also establish like internal committees for their organizations and the way that they use PROCORE to kind of keep up to date with their own processes and standardization of their document control on their end, and how they want their users to use it as well.
Really, our conclusion is that there was never really PROCORE that was an issue. It was the people that use it. We kind of, funnily enough, last presentation talked about a bit about it, but we bring a lot of the problems that we think are there are similar to problems that came between when you have to fax drawings over and then drawing in CAD and the evolution of technology. PROCORE is a new form of technology and it's a great communication sharing platform, but with new communication sharing platforms, sometimes people do get lazier with communication and aren't being as intentional. And we really think that intentionality and the people using it is really a lot bigger of the issue there. One more slide. When we started this process, we really thought the feedback was going to be, oh, we need to change these 3 buttons and we're going to fix PROCORE. We got it. We're going to figure out a few buttons. But really, I think what we came to the conclusion was it is about really understanding where these procedures are falling flat when it comes to communication and the back and forth. There's a lot of opportunities for growth, but it isn't necessarily, obviously there's little things PROCORE can do, but it's a lot less about PROCORE, more about the people that use it. So thanks.
Oh, what a nice piece of work. The content of that was the presentation. Learning from the first group and responding to the criticism the first group got. It was a really pretty tight presentation, very coherent. And I also love the topic. that it's like a consumer reports thing of something that lots and lots of people use. And there's enough actual content there to make it, I think, a useful document for the PROCORE people to get. Here's some people who actually studied our product and they're making some sensible recommendations about it. Mark, what struck you?
Yeah, so in the recommendations that you got from the survey participants, was that in direct response to the questions, or did that come after the questions? Was that like part of an interview?
So the recommendations were derived from our group from what we read through the survey. So the surveys were a bit more, the questions were a bit shorter, really trying to understand, okay, what affects your day-to-day here? How do you feel about the app? Like Mariah said, asked more targeted questions, and from there we had a conversation. We were able to compare all the results of what we thought our recommendations would be.
Okay, because I don't know. For me, it was a little like I thought your last slide, and when we were talking about intentional communication and the issues people were having versus the software, to me that was the really I just wanted to hear more about that. That seemed to me like the crux of the matter. And if so many people in the industry are using this thing, and some people are just annoyed by it, so they're not buying into it and not using it, or not internally figuring out where the pitfalls are and so forth. I don't know. To me, yeah. I mean, if the thing seems like it's a great thing, and you all seem very positive about it, and a lot of the apparently survey participants just think it's the best thing since sliced bread. But there are issues with it. I kind of want to know, yeah, how do you make it the best thing for everybody, or what do people? How can you advise people? Because I think that would be a real strength of your group, is to figure out effective ways to make it beneficial for everybody. The other thing
Anybody in the group?
Go ahead.
Anybody in the group want to respond to that?
I can take that one because it makes sense. Some of our respondents, we did go out to a couple like field personnel, and their specific issues were with like the access and having like organized documentation, which kind of stemmed from I guess within my own organization of how things are get done, where our field personnel, they're kind of like every PROCORE set up differently. It's a mess. So through that, we've actually developed our own PROCORE committee. It's still in the baby stages. And I'm actually thinking probably going to share this with them to kind of like be like, hey, this is how kind of like help them to really figure out where we kind of need to go with PROCORE within our organization, and making sure that all the project teams do use our standardization methods. Because it kind of like they're standardized, but then there's really no like push to keep it that way.
I thank you very much, because this is where, like, I was even trying to think, and I haven't worked, I've seen PROCORE is on our projects, and I'm, on these teams, and I use it, but I don't have to use it in a management way. And I'm wondering if, for instance, I've seen problems, and again, it kind of goes back to the first group too, is all this technology, and someone started off in your group talking about how construction has evolved. Well, it may have evolved, but maybe we needed that tail that we don't have anymore. Maybe that tail was good for something and we don't have it anymore. And like I see problems sometimes, you go through a submittal process and the submittals get to everybody and it gets approved, but then it's the wrong thing for the job, and people aren't seeing it. They've checked off all the boxes, but when it comes on site, is anybody actually looking at it and saying, gosh, is that really the right thing? Or are those angles galvanized, or shouldn't they be galvanized? And they're not galvanized, and everybody missed it. So it's like, I think that's great what you're talking about. The committees and talking about what you see really as the things that happen. They're not standardized. They're not learning from the mistakes and then incorporating them as we go forward in other jobs, because that's one of the problems. Someone once said, our construction industry is learning disabled, because we don't take our lessons learned. Even project teams that have had a good project, sometimes they don't take the things that they've learned and apply them to the next project that they go to. And then just in terms of the presentation stuff, like Mariah, I thought it was great when Bill had talked about the conversational, that personal kind of expression and talking. I really felt that. And I think, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think it's, again, like the robot versus, the conversational, like you're just, talking to me, you may be presenting to 100 people or 1,000 people, but I hear you because I feel like you're talking to me, like you're having a conversation with me when you go into that voice, and it's very effective.
It's definitely nerves.
Well,
Well,
you did it. You did it though. You made a complex quantitative topic very conversational.
yes.
And because of that, it was very easy to understand. And I want to build off what you were just talking about with Mark. I bet if you wanted to, you could probably find other companies willing to pay you to come in and advise them on how to use the PROCORE that they've already spent so much money on. If that was interesting to you, you could probably set yourselves up as a working group and go ahead and go around and make some recommendations.
Absolutely.
You've already done the groundwork. But that's just the two of us. Call on some people in the group, and then we'll take a break for 5 minutes. Alejandra, call on anybody in the group, get some feedback from anybody you want. Let other people in your group call on some people too.
Sophie, do you have any thoughts?
Somehow I knew you were gonna call on me.
Yeah, I like thought about it. I was like, that's okay. We'll do it.
Yeah, no, I thought one of the conclusions that the problem is not with PROCORE, it's with users, is the type of conclusion that a product development manager will never come up with, because then that means you don't have any more work to do. So I thought that was like a sort of funny moment in the presentation. Yeah, but I thought it was pretty thorough. I thought it's a really good method. It was very clearly presented. I liked following along with it, and I did like having a contractor perspective versus like the architect's perspective, and how that's different.
Yeah, it was nice to see that. Mariah, pick on anybody you'd like to get feedback from.
Arish.
I don't know why I thought you would call on me. I was actually really interested in knowing the origins of PROCORE. Like, I didn't know then to think of how it came from a residential like kind of story, like where the person's trying to follow the progress of his own house. That was really interesting, because now obviously being in the commercial construction environment, we just think of it that way, and it is a very good tool for us to use to be able to follow along the progress and everything. But to think someone did that for their own house, that's pretty interesting.
And one more, anybody in your group? Anybody else in your group? Shay, wanna?
Sure, I can pick someone.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far, that it was very clear presentation, really digestible information, easy and interesting to follow along with. And I particularly appreciated not just presenting the results, but the research methodology behind how the survey was put together.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nicely done.